Okay, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'd like to begin by acknowledging and paying respect to the fact that we in Philadelphia are located on the lands of the Lenni Lenape people. My name is Layla Cartier, Director of Craft Now Philadelphia, and I'm thrilled to share this First Friday preview with you virtually. Since we started doing these over a year and a half ago at this point, it has evolved into a very casual industry night where curators can come together and others working in the field to share what they're working on, since everyone's starting to return to their galleries. And we can also expand beyond Old City, not only with our presenters, but the audiences. To take care of housekeeping, I want to let you know that we have enabled the closed captioning thanks to help from friends at Disability Pride PA. So you can click on the button if you don't already see it on your screen. And we ask that you all stay on mute to avoid background noise while everyone is talking, but you can put questions in the chat. And at the end, we will invite everyone to unmute themselves to participate in hello and share any questions you have. So I hope everyone has had a chance to settle in. We are going to be talking with several presenters tonight, including learning about Roberto Lugo's installation God Complex, Different Philadelphia at Arthros Gallery. Zoe Greggs and Gabriella Nelson introduced Designing Motherhood, and the Clay Studio hosts a proper send-off before relocating to their new building. And so with that, I would like to introduce Arthros Gallery and Lynn Marsden Atlas. Roberto Lugo was invited to curate an exhibition drawn from the Penn collection with help from a 2019 grant award from the Sachs Program for Arts Innovation. And he worked virtually during the pandemic on God Complex, Different Philadelphia, which opened on September 11th. So I will be opening a presentation and turning it over to Lynn.
Thank you, Layla. I'm actually in New York, and about 5 minutes ago, I thought I was going to speak with you from the car because I was stuck in traffic. So forgive me for being a little rushed here. It's a pleasure for me to be with you all. I think many of you in Philadelphia may know Roberto Lugo and his work, but if you don't, Roberto is represented by the Wexler Gallery, and we had the great good fortune of writing a grant and receiving a special grant from the Sachs Program for Arts Innovation at Penn. We invited Roberto. We have never done this, and this was done by the Office of the Curator. Because I wear two different hats in my positions at Penn, I'm the executive director of the Arthros Gallery, and I'm also the university curator. So I manage a collection of 8,000 objects in about 115 different locations. So our idea when we wrote the grant was very simply to invite a contemporary Philadelphia artist who also was a social activist, to take a look at the collection at Penn, which has been entirely donated since the time of Benjamin Franklin, since basically 1740 with Penn's founding. So it's very eclectic, it's very diverse. And since it was during the pandemic, normally we would have brought Roberto in, we would have walked through the collection, we would have gone to a variety of sites to let him see works in situ. But because it was the pandemic, we actually were forced to give him a laptop with a database that basically told the story of that collection, all 8,000 objects. And he had the opportunity to look at that collection over about 6 months. And what became very apparent to him was the fact that there were a lot of portraits of white men over about 200 years, painted primarily by white men. And he felt that it was a statement about the patriarchy and the structures certainly of power and whose portrait was painted over that span of time. So we invited him not only to look at the collection, but also to incorporate his own work in the exhibition so that it could be in dialogue with this work. So Leila, I'm going to ask you to move forward to the next slide. So let me just walk you through a few images of the exhibition. It's the title, of course, God Complex. We were talking about these portraits, and someone referred to the fact that these individuals were very certain of their own importance. So I think that's where God Complex came. And Different Philadelphia really is Roberto's Philadelphia, very different, if you will, than the Philadelphia that's portrayed in these portraits. In other words, Roberto grew up in Kensington, and it is a very different scene than, you know, the portraits that we have in the room of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and Benjamin Franklin, for instance. Okay, Leila. Okay, so you can see this juxtaposition in a simple way. This, of course, is a self-portrait. Oh, this is a self-portrait of Roberto Lugo himself, an angry mob of peaceful protesters, it's called, with his name after it. And one of the interesting things about going through the collection is, because our collection is so unique and so unusual, we paired this piece with actually a 19th century unknown maker work by a Turkish artist. And we were interested in the overall patterning that you find in Roberto's work, as well as the patterning here in this vase. You can see through a doorway into part of the exhibition space on my right, where a pot of Roberto's is on a pedestal, but you'll notice that the pedestal is graffitied. Next slide, please. For those of you that don't know the Arthros Gallery, we are a Kunsthal, and we are at the very center of campus at 34th Street and Walnut at the University of Pennsylvania. We were founded in 1983, a gift of Arthros to share his joy of art with students and many generations of people coming to Penn, and also faculty, staff, and scholars. So this is really a wonderful example of the juxtaposition that was created by Roberto. So in one area, in the entryway, you have these very recognizable 19th century and 18th century portraits with these gilded frames or very ornamental frames. Here on your left, of course, on your right is George Washington. And these are certainly important figures in not only Penn's history, but also the history of the country. And as you step into the alternate space, you have Roberto's world, which is, we permitted him to, he asked if he could graffiti the walls. And after a minute, I sort of said, yes, absolutely, let's do it. And I think that it is a remarkable installation because of that. I was thinking the other day, if the walls were just painted red and did not have this intensity of layering and information and the whole idea of graffiti, of course, is to be seen. Somebody who is not seen wants to put their name on the wall, wants to be seen, wants to be important in a way. I exist, I live. So you'll see also, I forgot to mention this, the color of the walls in the traditional portrait area, I'll call it, are actually blue, and it's the same blue color that you find in Independence Hall in the room where the Declaration of Independence was signed. So it does have a historical significance as well. So the pot in the foreground is called Bridges, and it was done by Roberto in 2019. And it, on one side, it has a portrait of Benjamin Franklin. And Leila, I don't know if the next slide will show the opposite side or not. Maybe not. There you go. Okay. So on the other side, you have Roberto's father. So the story about this piece, it's very personal for Roberto. You know, when he was growing up as a young child, his father used to bicycle over the Ben Franklin Bridge. So his association with Ben Franklin is one association is with the Ben Franklin Bridge. And so on the sides of this piece, there's open lattice work with a blue glaze that reminds you of the structure also of the bridge. So what he chooses to do is to bring in people that might not ordinarily be found, figures that might not ordinarily be found in these precious objects, these vases and things. And he tells an important story of who was not seen, who was not talked about, and who was not valorized. Up above, you see in the lintel here, the Market Frankfurt line, which was done by Roberto and his colleague, whose tag name is Chop. Next slide, please. I wanted to mention that at the opening talk, Roberto announced that he was giving to the University of Penn art collection this piece, Dr. Rebecca Cole, as well as bridges. So we will be able to, as we're always trying to do, transform a collection to have more diversity and more inclusion. Dr. Rebecca Cole was the second woman in America to become a doctor, and she's a very important African-American woman, as an African-American woman, and a very important figure. She figures in the exhibition twice, once in this portrait, which was done with one of Roberto's, in tandem with one of Roberto's students, Molly Hutter, and also again on one of his teapots in the exhibition. Next slide. By the way, I didn't mention that, of course, working with a contemporary artist, they have their own ideas, and as the installation and the exhibition developed, of course, there were surprises along the way, and there were a lot of happy surprises. And one of them was that portrait that you just saw of Dr. Rebecca Cole, because the day that we were installing, Roberto, I believe, finished it the night before and brought it in. So one of the things that he does is this contemporary mashup between recognizable figures or heroes, in this case, a rapper here, Slick Rick, and on the opposite side of this vase, and this vessel pot, I should call it, because he calls it a street pot, actually is Barack Obama. So you'll see with the street pots that they're entirely hand built, and you can see the various layers. The texture is very thick and very interesting to see. And he's combined this mashup of these beautiful decorative patterns that you might see in Oriental or Japanese, Chinese vases, combined with the graffiti here on the top. Next slide. Again, another view into the historical portrait. This portrait of George Washington, by the way, was in a collection that came to Penn in 1912 from a bequest from a man named Dr. Thomas Evans, who grew up in West Philadelphia, who went to Paris as a young man and ended up becoming the surgeon dentist of Napoleon III. And this piece hung in his home in Paris for many, many years. But I love the juxtaposition with this energy, this excitement, this sense of color and decoration. It's a wonderful juxtaposition. It also breaks every, visitor's expectation of what a gallery should actually look like. It's not quiet, it's not contemplative, but it brings the street into the exhibition space. Next slide, please. And here, this is a work actually by Bruce Davidson. Bruce Davidson was an important young man who in the early 60s went down to document the various Montgomery bus demonstrations and the Freedom Riders. And from that time on, he documented almost every single march and demonstration that was led by Martin Luther King. And this is just one example. You can't see it very well, but it says, "Don't cry." And the headline says, "Don't cry when you lynch me." It's a very powerful piece. And Roberto selected 3 photographs from our collection to include in this area of his installation. Next slide. Here in the foreground, you have Roberto Lugo, you have Helen Drutz, and you have Jen Zwilling right here at the opening, and several other members that are recognizable, but they're talking about the street pot and the imagery. And I think on this one, sorry, my dog is here too. I believe it's Alma Thomas. I'm trying to think who else. In any case, they're examining the iconography as well as the portraits on both sides. Next slide. This is our team, as well as Roberto Lugo and his wife, Ashley. And it's this day that he's offering us bridges to be in the Penn collection, which I will absolutely put in a very significant spot so it's viewed by everybody. This part of Penn's collection is extremely public, and I think it's really important to include it in our legacy, if you will, as we go forward. This is our whole team, and it was a great night. And I hope that you'll come and see the exhibition. We're open 6 days a week, weekdays from 10 to 5, and on weekends from 12 to 5. Thank you so much. Oh, I should mention that there is a conversation with Jen Zwilling and Roberto Lugo on October 14th. We are hoping that it will be streamed from the gallery directly so they can sit and have a conversation. And we're going to ask our visitors to go on Zoom to be able to see it. And we also have a whole series of related programs until December. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lynn. The exhibition is gorgeous. Congratulations. And I enjoyed the opening night and seeing Roberto and all of the pieces in person. It is really important to be able to walk around them and experience the installation. And also the pedestals were pretty incredible that the pieces were placed on too.
That I should say that was another surprise. I had been at the graffitiing the first day, and the pedestals that we're using for this show we had used for the previous show. And when I came back the next day, Roberto had graffitied at least 2 of the pedestals. And I should say he also brought in 3 pedestals which are recycled. Sorry, I'm not in my own space. I'm at a friend's house. And my dog is here with me, trying to get the spotlight. But he also brought in 3 beautiful architectural remnants, if you will, from a very important Baptist church in Philadelphia that had been torn down, and he gilded them. And I hadn't expected that either. So it's great to see these beautiful gilded portraits.
Yeah, the salvage
portraits on top of these beautiful gilded pedestals.
Yeah. Next up, we have Zoe Greggs and Gabriella Nelson, and Gabriella also has a special visitor with her. They are introducing Designing Motherhood, a multifaceted project comprising a 2-venue exhibition, a book, design curriculum, narrative portraiture initiative, and many public programs. Part 2 of the exhibition recently opened in Philadelphia at the Center for Architecture and Design. following part one, which opened at Philadelphia's Mutter Museum. So I'm going to let Zoe and Gabriella take over the show.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody. So happy to be here. This is my son, August, who was doing so good looking at YouTube, and now he just threw the phone. So he's joining us tonight as well.
Great. He's warmly welcomed. Yeah, thank you so much for your introduction, Layla. I'm Zoe.
Gabriella.
And we're just gonna dive right in. We'll give you a bit more information about what Designing Motherhood is. We both work at Maternity Care Coalition, so we'll tell you a little bit about that. And then a film series that we're both co-directing, which is an extension of Designing Motherhood called For the Babies. Yep, so again, I'm Zoe Greggs. I'm the curatorial assistant on Designing Motherhood, an artist in my free time, and also co-director of For the Babies.
And I'm Gabriella Nelson, Associate Director of Policy at Maternity Care Coalition, also co-director of For the Babies. And my background is in city planning. So a lot of the work that I'm trying to do with Maternity Care Coalition is bring in those city planning policies that we maybe don't normally think are in the maternal child health sphere, and bring those things all together, connect the dots, so that that we really acknowledge and honor that being a caregiver, however you identify, really encompasses everything: public transportation, food systems, public education, housing. There is no separation, and it all needs to be talked about together. So, oh, go ahead. Okay. So, hold on, let me just check on the kid really quick because he's quiet. So with my city planning background, a lot of the storytelling that I'm used to doing or seeing is surrounded by maps or focused on maps, a lot of mapping. And when you think about city planning history and maps, you think about certain software that you need to do that kind of stuff, right? The maps that we see every day that the city uses, it uses a certain database and platform that's normally really only accessible to a certain type of person, kind of an elite population, if that's the right word. And it makes me think about like who is able to tell stories, who are stories being told about and from whose perspective. And so that's kind of how we wanted to look at this project through the lens of design, but also from my city planning background, acknowledging that stories are told by certain people for a specific user. And a lot of the times, these stories are designed not with the input, my kid is having a tantrum, woohoo, the input of the people that it affects the most. So we really wanted this project to focus on, come here, August, come, let's talk. We really wanted the project to focus on the people that are sometimes seen as invisible. Our direct service workers at MCC, oh, you okay? They do a lot of life and death work, honestly. Sometimes it truly is life and death, but there isn't necessarily enough recognition, and especially in advocacy and policy work. People like me, I'm not a direct service worker, but because I have a title, I tell stories. I'm supposed to be telling stories, but when people should be telling their own stories. So we wanted to give folks the opportunity to tell their own stories, to honor the work that they do, for people to realize how important the work that they're doing is. And hopefully that will help to direct and design policy and advocacy moving forward. I'm gonna mute myself really quick.
You're all right. Yeah, so we used to call this project that we're working on story banking. In fact, until I want to say up until a few weeks ago, and conversations that we were having around the stories that we're collecting and the interviews that we're having is the term story banking felt like a really lackluster term after a while. In a lot of ways, we were thinking about how it sort of infers that you just collect a story and then you log it away and that's it. the story doesn't live on. It's not really being heard by other people after a certain span of time. And that is the exact opposite of what we wanted. So when we were having a conversation with one of our editors on the project, he was saying, hey, there's this Scottish filmmaker who I've studied in the past, and he's used the term sort of narrative portraiture to describe his portrait works that he did. He's a visual artist as well. And we thought, the best artists, my professor would say this, steal. So we thought, why not rename this project, going from story banking to narrative portraiture instead? So hopefully these stories can live on, they can grow, and they can act as connective tissue, not just between the guests that we interview, but also anybody who sits down and takes the time to listen to these stories.
Absolutely. So when we started to create this project and we were looking for inspiration, a lot of our inspiration came from social media and Instagram, and looking at the different ways that people created portraits of everyday life and how beautiful and important it is. One of the things that just thinking about design, like I know that there are certain titles in schools that you go to become a designer, but we're all designers at the end of the day. We design our own lives. And as caretakers and caregivers, we are constantly designing something out of nothing. Like whether it's a Halloween costume or dinner or a hairstyle, we're all designing. And looking at these images really gave us inspiration about how do we take something that maybe people overlook or something that people would consider mundane or everyday and turn it into art and highlight it as art because it already is. So these are just some of the images that when we first started thinking about the project almost a year ago at this point, these were the images that we started to collect and kind of collage and look at for inspiration as we started to move forward.
So we were really inspired by Octavia E. Butler's work, particularly her story, Parable of the Sower. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it. It's a really beautiful book and extremely timely with what we're all currently moving through now, almost in a way that feels sort of prophetic. So something that we really connected to was the beginning of the story. In particular, the main character, Lauren Olamina, has to travel from her home. And this is due to the fact that it's attacked and her entire neighborhood is set on fire. So when she's leaving, she has already really prepared for this because she sees it coming, down the track. And she has created a few emergency packs. And in one of her emergency to-go bags is a pack of seeds. And that really inspired Gabriella and I, because if you're carrying seeds with you, as many Indigenous people have when they were forced out of their homelands as well, there is some sort of sense that you know that you're going to a home, that you're going to set down your roots, you're going to tend to your community and a garden and some sort of food source for those around you. And we thought that was a really beautiful thing. And our hope was that in some way, maybe these stories could act as seeds that you could carry with you that would transport you somewhere. So at the beginning of each episode's about 5 minutes, and we'll get into that more later. There is a parable that we have at the beginning, and we're calling them parables, but what they really are, they are quotes from maybe books that we've read that really connect with us, or music lyrics that really connect with the theme of the particular episode. And a child speaks the parable and introduces the listener to what's going to be the rest of the story. And we thought that this was really impactful to really hear it coming out of the mouths of babes, so to speak, especially because Designing Motherhood really does center families and children carry a lot of knowledge that we often undervalue in Western society as a whole.
The time capsule was also inspiration for us because Designing Motherhood, if you've seen the book or been to any of the exhibitions, is very much focused or highlights objects. So we wanted to think of this project also like a time capsule and thinking, how do you pick my kid is spitting water out on the floor, but it's just water, so we're just gonna roll with it. How do you pick certain objects that you want to represent yourself or your work or a time period later down the line? Yes, so we wanted to also look at the time capsule as a sense of inspiration and look at this project, the people that we're including, the portraits that we're including, the artwork that we're including as a time capsule for the work that we're doing here at MCC.
So how does this connect to Designing Motherhood, and what the heck is Designing Motherhood? So I describe Designing Motherhood as a sort of universe. It's a book that you can now go and buy, which you can see this lovely cover over here. I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts about it if you are able to peruse the book. And it's a wonderful collection of stories and backgrounds on design objects that connect to the arc of human reproduction, right? And one such example that Michelle Millar-Fisher and Amber Weinicker, who are the head curators of the entire exhibition, the book, everything that they discuss is the hospital bag. And thinking about the hospital bag as an object, and similar to Olamina's emergency to go bag, you know, people are collecting different things around the world for what they're taking when they're going into a hospital. And it's very indicative of your own experience, what you find comfort in, and also what your needs are depending on where in the world that you are. So in addition to a series of exhibitions, we have two. We have one up at the Center of Architecture and Design, which you can go and see. And we're going to show you some screenshots of that later on. And we also have one at the Mutter Museum currently. The one at CFAD is only going to be up for about 2 months. So it will actually end in mid-November. So if you're interested at all, please check it out. We have some wonderful artists there as well, in addition to some design objects. So Designing Motherhood partnered with Maternity Care Coalition, which is where Gabriella and I work. Maternity Care Coalition is the thought leader on the project. So it really takes a lot of different folks and experiences and backgrounds of expertise to make Designing Motherhood happen. And we're so thankful for everybody that's on this project.
Absolutely. And before I get to this slide, can I just say, Zoe mentioned a lot of things that Designing Motherhood is as a project. Designing Motherhood has also created such a culture. And as you can see, I am a mom to a 2-year-old who has a mind of his own. But one of the great things about this project and why the deliverables, the outcomes of this project are so authentic and people are receiving them so well is because we are able to be ourselves and show up as our authentic selves. So sometimes I show up as Gabby, the city planner, and my kid is with his dad and I have all the focus in the world. And other times I show up as Gabby, the stressed out mom who's doing a little bit of homeschool, doing a little work from home and needs a cocktail. But where I'm able to show up, we're all able to show up as our full selves, whatever that self looks like for that day. And it's reflected in the work that we're able to do. So I just wanted to just say that because Designing Motherhood is so many things, but it's also like a family, a culture. But for the babies, the Narrative Portraiture Project is a series of episodes that can be watched independently or all together as like a feature-length film. The episodes focus on different topics. So we have an episode on past, present, future of MCC and the work that we're doing, on education, wisdom, and knowledge, on culture and identity and community, systems change, housing and land and environment. So all of the episodes are different. They focus on different topics, but they're focused on the work that direct service workers are doing within MCC in our communities. MCC is a maternal child health organization, right? We don't do housing. So there are little gaps in our knowledge base where we do bring in guests, but for the most part, it is all about direct service workers. And in the first episode, you won't see the whole episode tonight. We'll show you a teaser, but the first episode teaser is myself, Julia Lewis, who has been at MCC for 26 years. She's a direct service worker, and she is like she is our best friend. Like we have monthly talks with her. We've really created this relationship and trust with almost all of the participants of the project. And also Karen Pollock, who is an executive level employee of MCC, but we figured that it would work best in the first episode, just so we can give people a lay of the land of what the organization is about, where it has been, and where it's going. So that's what you'll see in the teaser a little bit. But I just wanted to preface it because we keep on saying that this is all about direct service workers. And then the first thing that you see is me and Karen Pollock and then one direct service worker, but that's not indicative of the entire project. That's just the first episode that gives a lay of the land of what MCC is and what we do.
So something that we were really inspired by, and I will move faster if we are going over the 10-minute mark. So feel free to be like, quiet, once we hit that mark. But we were really.
I think we have a few more minutes.
Okay.
But go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna whiz through this. A lot of content, everybody. But we were really inspired by oral histories and the idea of sharing stories orally and not necessarily writing them down, particularly the griot. And something that we really started early on was making sure that everybody who was involved in the project, we have a few commissioned artists as well, received a training to make sure that then we were having relationships with our program staff who are doulas or educators who are really in the community, that people are culturally aware and understand our practices. So we had a training early on, and we also had a fantastic community engagement specialist by the name of Romy St. Hilaire, and she really helped lay the groundwork for this project, in addition to showing us a method of interviewing and storytelling, which really prioritizes like intuition and empathy and intentionality, and making sure that these stories are not extractive in any way. Something that's been really important to Gabriella and I and everybody on the project is making sure, I think oftentimes when stuff like this happens, people's stories are just sort of collected and then they're pushed to the wayside. And that's the exact opposite of what we wanted to do. We wanted to make sure that this was a family, that people did feel connected. So quickly, the teaser, if that's okay. If we don't have time, not the end of the world. We can just look at screenshots of the exhibition.
I guess let's look at some screenshots because the exhibit is amazing.
Yes, of course. So this is the Designing Motherhood exhibition, which again is now free to view at the Center for Architecture and Design. And we're just going to flip through to show you what it looks like. So here.
Oh, go ahead, Zoe.
Oh, no, please.
So because we won't be able to show the teaser, which is totally not a big deal, but the full length episode, he called his cousin. The full length episode of episode 1 for the project for the babies is on display at the Center for Architecture. So if you do have time to go to the Center for Architecture, you can see the full episode that has been edited and is in its final iteration. And if you do happen to see it and you think it's wonderful, let us know. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Gabriella. And right here, you can see on your right, we have 2 beautiful pieces by the artist Michelle Angela Ortiz. She is Philly-based, and they are actually of 2 of our direct service staff, inspired by, oh my gosh, I completely forgot.
Actually, by Yemaya and Oshun, who are Orishas in West African traditional religion.
Thank you. This is another work by Allison Kearney Moses. It's a wood sculpture. It's gorgeous. I am an artist and have worked in museums, and I know that you are not supposed to touch the objects, but let me tell you, it is so hard not to just want to lean in and just like, So I have to stay like a few feet away from this piece. It's gorgeous. And then here are a few of the design objects that are featured currently in the space. And this last work was done by Helena Mediferia, and she's a fantastic artist based in New York in the Boston area. And she also did a collage. One of our beautiful community advisor on the project by the name of Portia on the right, and Michelle Sutton on the left, who is a doula. They're both doulas and lactation experts and have worked in Philadelphia for quite a bit. And these pieces are called Crowning Care. So I would be very excited if everybody checked it out and let us know your thoughts. If you want to email us, you totally can. And thank you all for having us.
Thank you guys so much. You know what I haven't been doing is putting links in the chat, and I'm going to do that during our next presentation. The exhibit is amazing. I highly recommend going to see it. This is unusual that I've actually been able to see a few of the things that we're talking about. So congratulations to you on all the hard work and seeing this project through to where it is today. I'm going to quickly say that we're taking a break next month from the First Friday preview because it's Craft Month, which is in November. Our anticipated annual events are coming up, so please join us for the Philadelphia Museum of Art Contemporary Craft Show, which has its preview on November 4th and then runs at the Convention Center the 5th through the 7th. We will have our symposium on November 5th with keynote speaker Kelly Morgan. I'm going to put links to the chat or links to more details in the chat. And then our annual hands-on event for kids is going to be at Smith Memorial Playground this year. We're really excited. It's going to be outside. Last year, we delivered take-home kits and we had a Zoom program. This year, we're going to be able to do demonstrations and have some take-home pieces to make sure it's as safe as possible. So everyone is welcome to join us for those events, and more will be happening. So with that, I want to welcome our last presenter, Jen Zwilling. The Clay Studio, as some of you might have heard, is moving, and they are celebrating their last months in its current home in Old City. And curator of artistic programming, Jen Zwilling, is here to talk to us about the generous gift of important works from Helen Drett's collection in an exhibition and auction entitled A Proper Send-Off. And this will benefit the future programming of the Clay Studio. So hi, Jen, how are you this evening?
Hi, ooh, I was on mute too long, sorry. Hi, Layla, I'm good. Thank you for inviting me to come and speak tonight. I'm so inspired by those who went before me. The Roberto Lugo show is beautiful, and the Designing Motherhood show, I'm also excited to say, got to see. It's amazing, and the work you're doing is so important. As a mother myself, I feel that supporting parents is a major way to make our world a better place. So thank you for doing that. I'm going to share my screen. Oops, let's get the right thing up here. Hold on one sec. Oopsies, 1 second, everybody. Sorry about that. I thought I was all ready. Okay. So as Layla said, the Clay Studio is moving. We are very excited. I know we've been talking about it for a long time, but it takes a super long time to raise enough funds to go forward with a construction project that is $13.5 million. We're excited that we were able to raise that money, including lots of generous donors, some of which I see here in the room. So thank you so much. The Clay Studio was founded in 1974. We're approaching our 50th anniversary. I had the honor to speak with some of our founders earlier today and really talk about how it's gone from an organization that was started by 5 friends who just needed to share resources and has grown into an organization with 17 staff members, a $2 million annual budget. We see close to 4,000 students around the Philadelphia area every year with our Claymobile, 4,000 adults in our school. We have 12 resident artists. We have a permanent collection. We have a robust gallery program. We have about 150 artists that we represent in our shop. We have 45 artists who we serve through a group studio space called the Associate Artist Program. We have internships and all kinds of other wonderful things. One of those many things I mentioned, the collection, has always been in the basement. It was started about 25 years ago by Jimmy Clark, who was the artistic director at the time. And we're very excited that in the new building, we're going to be able to put that collection on permanent display. It really is a physical history of the clay studio, lots of guest artists and resident artists and founders and all kinds of important ceramic artist work is shown, is held in that collection. And every person who walks in the door, from visitors to the gallery to students in the school, are going to be able to be inspired by that work in the future. So to that end, the last exhibition in our current building is called A Proper Send-Off, because we feel that we want to make sure we honor the importance of the building that we have been occupying for the last 30 years, and really the location in Old City for the last almost 50 years. Every proceed from this auction will go to the casework and the care for that collection in the new building. So it's a very specific one-to-one. We've gotten lots of donations from several different donors, which we're really excited about. And the lead gift is from Helen Drutt. Helen Drutt, for those of you who don't know, is one of the people who built up the craft community here in Philadelphia, craft art community, starting in the 1960s. I spy Ruth and Rick on the call, another key couple of people in that foundation that was created. So Helen was generous enough to donate some works sort of to honor her 90th birthday last year. And I said, well, can I just wait a little bit and have that auction right before we move? And she was gracious enough to say yes to that. So I'm just going to walk you through some of the pieces that are that have been donated by Helen, but we actually have over 100 pieces in the auction, and I put the link in the chat. Anyone who wants to go over to that and check out the auction, I would be grateful to you for taking a look. This piece is by Bill Daly. William Daly is 96 years old. He is an amazing person. He was a World War II veteran who has a very interesting life story. He was actually shot down over Germany on his first flight mission and spent time in a German war camp. And while he was there, he had one book with him. It was a philosophy book. He made a friend of another person who was there with him who also had one book. And so he talks about how the two of them read these books over and over again and talked about them throughout their time there. And I think that had an incredible impression on him as an artist and as a human. A lot of these vessels that he made, he talks about them representing the cosmos. Kind of, he's putting his ideas about love, about spirituality, and about the connectivity he sees among many cultures in the world into these forms that he creates into these vessel pots. They're really beautiful. And Zoe was talking about wanting to touch that wooden sculpture in the gallery. This is another one of those pieces, but it's ceramic and I'm really nice. So you can touch it if you come in, check it out in the next couple of days. It's really beautiful. Definitely one of those. Sometimes I say that I want to like eat the pieces. I guess not really, but it feels that like you want to have some kind of visceral connection with them. This one is by Nicholas Ariave Portela. He is a British artist who was a guest artist at the Clay Studio in, I'm going to say the wrong year. I think it was 1994. And he achieves these very thin, amazing vessels that have a lot of movement. You can see that they kind of look like, you know, he threw the thing and then kind of compressed it with his hands. And then they also have these amazing colored glazes and stains on them that allow, as you look at it and as the light changes, the colors actually change as well. It's pretty amazing. It's not quite hyper color for people in my generation, you know what I'm talking about, but it's almost that. This is by Richard Deutsch. He's an architect who started out as a ceramic artist. It's a pit-fired large vessel. And I love the idea that it's something that was created by someone who had a mind for architecture and was trying to kind of figure out his creative path early on through ceramics, and then eventually moved on to architecture. But again, when you see it in person, it has a lot of volume on the top, but this little tiny foot really balances there beautifully. These two are by James Makins. He is the almost retired, I believe he's retiring at the end of this year, professor at the University of the Arts. He's the head of the ceramics department. This is a very small little tiny cup by Rudy Staffel. He was the head of ceramics at Tyler School of Art for a long time, and his arrival in Philadelphia in the 1960s coincided with him doing some experimentation with porcelain, and he got really excited about the translucent quality of the material. And this is another one. You can see a little bit more that when you shine a light into these objects, the spots where the porcelain is thinnest allow that light to come through. And this is a really beautiful vessel in that it has those qualities of thickness, opacity, and thinness where the translucence happens. It also has words scratched around the outside of it. It actually says, when you stop looking, there it is. And it's just, you have to kind of examine it and like turn it around to really see, but he was also a philosopher. This is monkey doll is what Helen calls it, but I like to call it a weird baseball monkey. It's probably inappropriate, but 1972, Elizabeth Stewart, a genius ceramic artist who we lost too soon. I think about 10 years ago, she died. She also was a professor. She taught at the University of the Arts, and her works are usually completely ceramic, animals, inanimate objects, kind of almost always with some kind of mysterious, uncanny quality. And I had never seen one of these fiber and ceramic sculptures until Helen offered it to us. And I've now dug into the research and found that she made a whole series of them. And the point was that they were uncanny. That is this, connection between humanity and animals. The hands and feet are exquisitely sculpted and very human. So definitely another one that's worth seeing. And I know that people in the gallery want to touch it because there are now handprints in the fur. And every now and then I have to go in the gallery and kind of like smooth it down. People just seem to want to hug it, I guess. And then finally, this is a vessel by Robert Weinicker, who we unfortunately lost last year. Example of one of his kind of earlier pots, maybe like a 1980s, earlier than, his later work was very architectural and had more representational imagery in it. His earlier pottery has these wonderful places again where he's thrown the work, but then he's used his hands to manipulate. You can see the part that's pressed out, the part that's incised, and he's used the blades and really skillfully to emphasize the different aspects of the pot. Oh, I did add one more thing. So there are many other works in this show that were donated by other people, including this one and the next were donated by Robert Wallner. He was a board member in the 1980s and 90s for the Clay Studio. These are both by Andrea Gill, who's a very important artist, ceramic artist who taught at Alfred School of Art up in New York State for a long time. Both boxes shaped like strange fish. This one's a fish, this one's a person. I highly recommend that you come in and just find yourself completely surrounded by all these wonderful objects that people have loved over the years, and think about bringing one home with you if you would like. And you'll know that you helped the Clay Studio in our continuing efforts to create what we believe will be the most comprehensive ceramic art center in the United States, possibly in the world. There are lots of other ceramic art centers, but not many of them comprise all of the amazing things that we do. And I can brag about this. I've been there for 6 years, but it's really all of the people who have come before me and all of my colleagues who make it an amazing place with their classes and our community service. So I hope that you come by tomorrow for not only this show, but also the pottery sale, last pottery sale in Old City, where if any of you have been there before, you know there are just tables and tables, thousands of pieces of ceramic from our students to donations from our resident artists that will also be selling for prices as low as $2 and $3, and that the proceeds from that also are going to benefit our collection storage. So thanks again, Layla. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you all for being here. Please remember to support all of these amazing organizations. And I want to thank Zaria for joining us tonight and helping. She's our Drexel Co-op and project designer for 6 months. And we're so glad to have her. And she's actually helping set up the pottery sale tomorrow. So I'm excited for her to meet new colleagues at the Clay Studio. Remember to support Craft Now, and please come to all of our programs during Craft Month in November. And with that, I invite you to unmute yourself and say hello, and we'll talk to you again in December on this platform. Thanks, Jackie. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Ruth and Ruth.
Hello,
See you tomorrow.
I came over today, but I couldn't find you today there.
Yeah, I've been here all day. I did lunch and learn from here too.
Oh, probably it was around after 12.
Yeah, I had Kathy Reagan and Catherine Narrow and Amy on Lunch and Learn.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was great.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
And there's Paul Stark. I'm talking to you tomorrow too. And
Yes, you are.
And
We have the loyalist cheer
Yeah.
tonight.
And we'll see
Yes.
you too soon, Paul and Connie. Definitely we'll work it out.
Okay, good.
Take care of our business here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you to all the presenters. That was really
it
terrific.
was.
Yes, amazing
It was.
variety.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you for putting on these shows. They're really great. I'm so glad that the pandemic pushed us into a new way of learning and seeing what's happening in the city.
thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one thing we don't know is which day is the Ross Gallery closed?
Mm.
Is it Monday or is it Sunday?
I
It's
think
open
it's
6 days.
Monday.
Sunday.
I think it's Monday.
Uh-huh. 6 days I heard that it's open, but I'll look it up. But
I think it's Monday, but don't quote me on that. I'm not
okay,
sure.
but
It's
that
been
would
a
be
while.
logical. That would be logical. I'll look. Thanks.
Schedule your visit.
Mhm.
Hi, Jen. Hi, Layla. It's been a
Hello.
while, Jen.
Hey.
How are you?
Nice to see you.
It looks
I actually just texted you, so you'll get to that whenever. But I just wanted to say hello, and I kind of caught the end of it because I was in physical therapy, and whew, let's just say it was a long session.
Been a long day. It has indeed. Well, it's so nice to see you and everybody else. I have to go take my chicken out of the oven. So
Okay, don't burn your food.
Ruth and Rick, I just put a link to the Arthros Gallery. It looks
Oh,
like
great.
you have to schedule your visit.
Okay, thanks.
So if you click on that real quick before I close out the program,
Okay,
it'll
Great.
open in your browser.
all right, great.
Have a great night, everybody. I'll see you soon.
Thanks again.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, Layla. Have a good night.
Good night.